the war has reached Russia. Two separatist groups that I believe are based in Ukraine have attacked a town in Russia, and they're taking the war to Putin, and they're promising that they are going to Moscow. That is the hometown of Vladimir Putin. So, as the war front is surrounding Putin, as Putin is in trouble, so are his minions, which are the presidents of countries in Africa that support Vladimir Putin politically and financially through pillaging the resources of their own people and sending them to Russia so that Russia can invade Europe and NATO. Now, here's the thing, for a Zimbabwean, as Vladimir Putin is being destroyed, so will be Edim Nangagwa be destroyed. This whole thing, this whole bill that Edim Nangagwa passes, that seeks to prohibit Zimbabwean citizens from engaging with people from other countries, aims to stop or try to stop a situation whereby other countries will be taking punitive measures or punitive positions against the government in Harare. So they believe that by putting a law that stops Zimbabweans from engaging with these foreign agents, ZANU-PF would be safe. Well. ZANU-PF is playing with fire. Because here's the thing. Their boss, not Edi, was Edi is a small boy. Their boss, who is Vladimir Putin, is the one who started the war. You see, ZANU-PF have survived all of these years because their boss, Putin, was not at war with the most powerful country in the world, the United States. But their boss made a mistake by invading Ukraine, thereby starting a war with the United States, and also making enemies with Ukraine, which will defend its territory in Ukraine, being supported by NATO, and also now being attacked by a Russian separatist militant group who are going to take this opportunity now to fight Vladimir Putin at home, and they're already saying it loud. Some of one of them is called the Russian. I forgot the name. There's two separatist groups. I forgot their names. Called the Russian what? I forgot. Russian something army. Then there's another one also. Also, I forgot his name. But here's the thing: they are planning to attack Moscow, which means Putin is surrounded. And with these separatists on the side of Ukraine and having links with the Ukraine military, a Ukraine military which has links with NATO, and NATO which is supported by the United States. So you can see the links there that go all the way to attacking Moscow, which is linked to Edim Nangagwa and ZANU-PF. So you see, time is up for ZANU-PF. What kept them in power was Russia and China all along. Now Russia and China are fighting a hot war with Washington. And as Washington is taking the theaters against Moscow around the world, not just in Ukraine, but now we're seeing visibly in South Africa, with the ICC having issued a warrant of arrest or asked South African government to arrest Vladimir Putin when he comes here for the BRICS summit. We are seeing that war between the United States and Russia at play here in South Africa. Last year, about 12 months ago, I think it was about last year this time, I did a video that said Ramaphosa is in a box. He's stuck between two places and doesn't know what to do. And that time, God didn't tell me whether it's talking about Russia or USA. He just showed me a box. And I remember explaining it and saying I do not know what it means. And I remember saying that I am seeing a snake moving around the buildings in Pretoria, the Union buildings, and it was like a snake moving around slowly, but looking at Ramaphosa. It was saying something, but I couldn't hear what it was saying. But it was looking at Ramaphosa intently, as if like I want a snake, how snakes move around in a round formation to in a way to say, okay, Ramaphosa, I'll put you in the middle. You will not be able to get out of this one. It took months for us to realize that it's Ramaphosa's Berkeley between uh, between America and Russia. Ramaphosa has to figure out a way of balancing those relations. And we see the war at play at the moment. And Ramaphosa has chosen the side of Russia. They've had military drills in Cape Town. We have said before that the Cape Town uh, port is very significant to international global trade. Whoever has got control of it has got a leverage in international trade. So Ramaphosa and the ANC, they chose to be on the side of Russia and China. So in the case of a hot war and escalating tensions in global trade, South Africa has chosen to side with Russia because they've allowed the Russians and the Chinese to do a naval thing here in Cape Town. That will definitely not go down well in Washington, and that has caused Washington to retaliate. And through the ICC, we see this warrant of arrest, which South Africa has got no choice but to comply. If South Africa does not comply, this is the thing. This is not just this news, just this politics that that South Africa can just stop. Don't South Africa can just go ahead and have a BRICS summit with Vladimir Putin. They don't arrest him, and then the Americans are just gonna say one or two things and leave it like that. No, it doesn't stay there. This is now war. If Ramaphosa does not arrest Putin, there will be consequences for South Africa. And those consequences for South Africa is South Africa is being punished for supporting Putin. And guess who else is supporting Putin next door? It's Idim Nangako. So if South Africa is being punished through whatever is gonna be done on the AGOA deal or whatever sanction, whatever shape or form that the United States is gonna take against South Africa, is going to be a whip that is meant to teach other countries that support Putin that you must not do that. And other country that we know that supports Putin blatantly and ignorantly is the next door to South Africa, Zimbabwe. Now, Zimbabwe is now putting itself in a precarious position whereby their ability to hold on to power does not depend on stopping me from talking to Washington. Washington does not need to talk to me or anybody in the opposition to do what they need to do to Itim Nangakwa. They don't need to talk to any of us. No, that law is just useless because Washington just looks at Putin and where Putin is getting support, and Washington is going to attack where Putin gets support. The first place that Washington is going to attack is South Africa, and Zimbabwe is on the line, not because they hate it from me, but because they're independent thinkers and they are fighting a global war. So in this global village, ZANU-PF must not be too proud in their sovereignty as if they themselves granted themselves sovereignty. I always say it, a sovereignty of nations is granted by the global superpower. Okay, you are not told these things explicitly, but that's the fact. All right. When the superpower decides that your sovereignty does not matter anymore because you are disobedient to the superpower. Well, here's the thing: you can be disobedient to the superpower, and the superpower can just throw a few sanctions here and there. That's what has happened to ZANU PF. A few sanctions here and there, and ZANU PF has been in power for all of these years. But this time around, the scene of ZANU PF and ANC is more egregious than before because now the biggest threat of the superpower is Russia. And therefore, the superpower is not going to throw a few, what do you call it, a few sanctions here and there against their biggest threat. They're not going to stop there. They will go further. This is a war. This is no longer a cold war. This is a hot war because the proxy war in Ukraine is real. It is a hot war, and the West intends to win that war, not to lose that war. They intend to win the war in Ukraine, and they intend to win the war in South Africa. And what makes you think that they no longer intend to win the war in Zimbabwe? So now the temperature has changed. The political environment has changed. It's not like before. Before, before when Washington didn't have much of a problem with Putin. So Putin's friends in Harare could still be stealing from Zimbabweans, giving money to Putin and China, and Washington can see it and keep quiet. But now Washington cannot keep quiet anymore because ZANU PF's evil is no longer just oppressing black Zimbabweans. It is now aiding the arch enemy of Washington to equip the arch enemy of Washington, which is Vladimir Putin, so that Vladimir Putin can have enough money and firepower to destroy Europe and United States. So you see now the Americans now are facing an existential threat coming from Putin, who is supported by Idi Mnangagwa. So the tentacles of Putin, which is Idi Mnangagwa, the ANC, and other African leaders, those tentacles, the West will have to chop them off in order to incapacitate Putin. So now here's the thing, ZANU-PF. You see that you cannot break any longer and say that you are going to be in power forever. You cannot say that. Because when you say that, you forget to understand that what has kept you in power previously is not sovereignty. The only country that is sovereign is the superpower. All countries below the superpower are only as sovereign as the superpower allows it. Okay, do you understand? So do not rest too much on your sovereignty. Do not rest too much that you begin to make draconian laws that seek to undermine the activities of Zimbabweans that are demanding freedom, justice, equality, and human rights from you. Things that you should have been giving freely to citizens anyway. Citizens must not be revolting to ask for human rights. They must not be revolting to ask for equal opportunities in the economy. They must not be revolting for all of those things, for the government that works for the people. So the pride and arrogance of ZANU-PF made them think that they have got all the power in Zimbabwe. Then they got so drunk and thought that all that power means that nobody in the world can touch them because of international law. But international law only works as long as the superpowers that is not facing an existential threat that is aided and abated by a regime like a ZANU-PF regime that is aiding and abating in financing financially and politically, financing or aiding politically Vladimir Putin, for Vladimir Putin to attack the West. So you will see that Zimbabwe is a colony of Russia and China. We have seen in previous installations of world wars, Germany lost Namibia after losing in the First World War. Japan also lost, China lost Korea after they lost the Second World War. They also lost the islands in the Pacific. So when superpowers fight during a world war scenario, the losing superpower also loses its territories or its colonies. I know that these days we don't use the word territories, we don't use the word colonies anymore, but what it's there is it's just a different words that we use. Now we used to say we use the words like influence, like this country is influenced by that country. That's a modern word. But 100 years ago we used to use the word colony. So that is why I'm saying that we are a colony of Russia and China. So as Russia is losing this war against the West, they also are going to pay reparations through losing colonies. I've heard Janet Yellen, who is the Treasury Secretary of the United States, and other American politicians alluding to this idea that as they fight Vladimir Putin, as the war ends, Putin has to pay for this war. And payment is not limited to money coming out of Moscow or from the Russian Reserve Bank, but payment also include Russia losing some of its colonies or countries that it influences, of which there are many in Africa, including Zimbabwe. So, in a scenario where the Western powers begin to punish Putin and forcing Russia to pay by losing their colonies, including Zimbabwe, on that day, your sovereignty ZANU-PF will mean nothing on that day. He will melt. I always say in this video that God said, on the day when God comes to Harare, even the national army will melt. Here's the thing, when Washington has defeated Moscow, Angiti, and they have decided that you are losing your colonies. Remember, I told you that your sovereignty is guaranteed by the superpower. At that time, the superpower would have changed the global laws to justify or to allow it to annex the countries that were influenced by Russia, taking those countries from a Russian influence to the Western influence. So when that deal is done on a global level, ZANU-PF cannot be supported by China or Russia because China and Russia would be already be tied by the other international countries. On that time, in that scenario, and in that day, it's not about us Zimbabweans going to ask America or ask Britain. No, it's about them, the superpowers, making a decision, therefore, to make a transition from a government that is pro Moscow to a government that is pro Washington. And that's going to be decided by them and not by Ngobani Zondo or by Nelson Chamisa or Itai Tamara or whoever, or Job Sikala. So putting Job Sikala in prison does not stop all these events from happening. These events will happen whether you put Job Sekala in prison or you take him out of prison. In fact, putting him in prison and denying people their human rights, violating their rights and their political rights, makes the case much easier for the superpowers to replace the government in Harare. You see, there are governments like the ANC governments that can survive at that page if they can just change their mind. Ramaphosa can change the mind of the ANC and redirect the policies of ANC from being pro Moscow and pivot to pro Western ideologies within the ANC, and they will save their behind. However, ZANU-PF cannot have the same mercies because the West has been demanding ZANU-PF to to carry out political reforms over many years now, over 23 years. And ZANU-PF has been arrogant against the global superpower. I mean, ZANU-PF is a small little thing like this, arrogant against a big superpower with all the power for many years. So the patience of the superpower comes to a place where now drastic measures have to be taken. And when the superpower takes drastic measures, the the legality of it is going to be strengthened by ZANU-PF's unwillingness to create an environment where there is human rights, dignity, political reforms and all that. And the people in the National Army also have been telling them the same thing. You make a mistake by betting on one horse, which is ZANU-PF. I've always said on this channel that the National Army, as the guarantor of the sovereignty of the nation, should have guaranteed free and fair elections, creating an environment where any political party can rule Zimbabwe, govern Zimbabwe, and with the military watching over the integrity and the sovereignty of the whole country, with the Central Intelligence Organization being an organization that works for whichever party that comes into power. But because of greed and avarice, these men did not deem it fit to do justice to the people of Zimbabwe and the political system. They decided that they themselves are going to marry or align themselves to one political party, which is ZANU-PF, which they will keep in power through whatever means necessary and oppress people of Zimbabwe as much as they can, so that they can extract as much resources as they can from the citizens of Zimbabwe whilst they are still in power, and hoping that nothing can be done to them because of the international law and the sovereignty of the nation, forgetting that that sovereignty is guaranteed by the superpower, and the superpower can revoke those rights at any given time. And also, as I have told you, that it will be because the superpower will defeat the other superpower, which has been the guarantor of the Zimbabwean sovereignty. That superpower is Russia. It's going to be destroyed, or it's going to be defeated by the United States. So if you are ZANU-PF, you are betting for a Russian win over the Western powers, which is not going to happen, because Russia is not really as much of a big superpower as it claims to be. Russia is a rogue state, a rogue superpower. The only reason why it is called a superpower is because after the World War, it was in alliance with the United States, and yeah, it was in alliance with the United States and Britain and France, and then they won the Second World War. But after that, the Soviet uh, economy took a nosedive because of their policies, the communist, socialist policies that don't work, and their economy became smaller, their influence became smaller, and at the same time, the United States grew in the global stage, and therefore at the moment, the regard that Russia has is only because they have gotten a seat in the United Nations Security Council. But if you look at its military strength, look at its political strength, and other factors that determine superpower candidacy, Russia is nowhere near the United States. The United States essentially does not have competition. It just creates competition. It is this number one up there, number two is down there, and then it just elevates number two to make it look like it's a formidable foe, but it's not really a formidable foe. It can be crushed at any moment. All right. So we're gonna stop it here. So what we can say conclusively is that ZANU-PF is in trouble. Perhaps that's the reason why Itim Nangagwa is stealing faster than ever before, because he knows that his time is almost up. So he's got no time to be spending money on building roads and clinics. He would rather spend that time stealing all that money, because even him himself can see that the writing is on the wall. So Idi Mnangagwa perhaps knows very well that his time is almost up. So he has to steal as much as possible. That is why there is no development in Zimbabwe. So as a Zimbabwean watching this and seeing this development, it means that it's almost time for freedom. Freedom is coming close by. Even ED knows that. That is why he is stealing left, right, and center. Because he knows that anytime lizokhala icilongo. Holy is that Lord. Have a great evening.